So today on what's our show called?
Teatime with Xahn.
Today on why am I saying it then? You say it.
Welcome back to Teatime with Xahn, guys. This is a test.
I'm not here.
You can have this tutorial. Tutorial. You're in charge of tutorials.
All you have to do is press A, B, X, Y in that order, and the very next thing that will happen is the game will say, and then stab you in the palm until you explode.
With a toothpick.
With a toothpick. It's very important. By the way, I don't really need to do a test, so we're good. We're kind of live, quote unquote.
Oh, are you done?
I suppose I could do a test if you really want me to.
No, you said you were going to do a test.
Well, I did a test.
Oh, well, you did a test, and then you said that we needed to change things, and so I assumed that we therefore needed more tests.
Now, today we're going to discuss a very important topic. Should we have the right to poke our sisters with toothpicks?
I say only as long as the toothpick is microscopic.
Okay. Hang on, let me get a splinter off here. Now here, watch. You see this little splinter right there?
I don't want to be poked with the splinter, then it'll get infected.
Poke.
Guys, when I get gangrene in my leg and they have to amputate it...
What about your skull?
And they have to amputate my head, you'll know what happened.
It wasn't me. I was actually out of town when it happened.
It's not on the video.
I should get rid of this because that's always distracting, I found. It's harder to look at the camera when you're on camera, you know what I mean?
It's not distracting to me, though. I just look at myself and talk to myself.
Exactly, but you should be looking at the camera.
But I can't look at the camera. The camera's on the screen.
Look at the camera! Look at it!
No!
Okay, now that her face is melted. So, what were we going to talk about, my dear? I mean, it's your show, so...
We were talking about continuality in fictional settings.
Continuality, I like this. Let's continue.
Yes, so...
Shall we continue with continuality?
Yes.
Yeah, you gotta do it right. Good. There we go.
Well, you didn't let me try it.
Oh, sorry, continue.
Good. You know what's more distracting than looking at myself on camera?
Looking at a black screen.
No. Looking at you looking for the black screen.
Is that better? Does this work for you, dear?
Yes, okay. So, anyway.
Oh, God, I'm going to have to actually turn to look at you. Yerg! I'm still having neck issues. Sorry, Yerg! In fact, it's actually worse than usual today. Damn it. My chair is too large. I can't turn anymore. So, sis, tell me what you think about continuity within... I can't hold my neck like this. Oh, God, I'm losing my head. Okay, I got it. Oh, God. I am so glad I'm on hydrocodone right now. Holy crap. My sister's laughing because I'm in lots of pain, because she's a very malicious kind of person, you know. She's just thinking... Actually, I'm not in a lot of pain. Like I said, I'm on hydrocodone right now. But I kind of lost function in my neck for a bit there. Okay, now you can do it. Oh, God! Now, as you guys know, at least you should know.
I wasn't done explaining.
You weren't?
No, I hadn't even started.
Okay, I'll keep poking you. And you've explained. Those really don't fit you. I can't even tell what that looks like. I'm sure they can. Continue then, my dear. I will leave you be.
So this evening... Oh, God, they just fell over top of my glasses.
Give me those.
This evening, we are going to be discussing the concept of what works better. Having a fictional story via a video game, a television show, a movie, a book, a comic, a whatever. Have that either being episodic, where each section is part of an ongoing story.
What we usually refer to as serials.
But that's not actually the definition.
I looked it up.
Well, that definition lied. The definition of a serial started back when they first started issuing dime newspapers way, way back in like the colonial days. And they'd have these things called dime stories. And dime stories were serials. And it was a self-contained short story that you went and you bought, sort of like buying a newspaper.
She knew about this. She was actually there at the time.
Are you saying I'm old?
Yes. You hide it very well, though. The secret is lemon baths.
And oil of Olay.
Oh, well, yeah, that too.
But anyway, it is either having a continuous story where it is one continuity. Everything ties into the next. At the end of each section, you have a cliffhanger which leads you into the beginning of the next section. Or...
Hang on. I'm going to pause to give you an example of what she's talking about, for anybody who doesn't quite get it. An example of one type of this is the Kingdom Hearts series. Even though the games kind of jump around a little bit in timeline, it is still one coherent, concrete story. No part of it is actually
You can't
missing.
play Kingdom Hearts 1 and then skip to Kingdom Hearts... What's the latest one?
Dream Drop Distance.
Which is number...
Seven, I think.
Okay, you can't play Kingdom Hearts 1 and then jump to 7 and then go to 5 and...
Yeah, it doesn't
et cetera,
work
et cetera, et cetera. You have to go 1, 2, 3, 4 in order for the story to make sense.
Another example of the completely one-to-one-to-one example of this is Season 3 of Star Trek Enterprise, where literally when one episode would end, the next episode would take up, within a matter of hours of the end of the previous one. So unlike, even though Kingdom Hearts was one concrete series, it was here and there, right? But you still needed all of it to examine it. But in Star Trek's example, it was literally, one right after the other. But both of those are examples of what she's talking about.
And if you prefer to read books rather than play video games or watch television, or you just don't happen to be familiar with either of those two, a more popular version of this would be the Harry Potter series in book or movie, depending on which one you've seen, where literally if you watch the first Harry Potter, you can't turn around and watch... Well, you can. You can turn around and watch the fifth Harry Potter or read the fifth Harry Potter, but you're not going to have any clue how Harry Potter got to where he was in book 5 from where he was in book 1. And you're probably going to be pissed off because you have so many questions.
And that's another good example of the second type, aka the string, as I like to call it, as opposed to the Tetris block, which is what Kingdom Hearts is. The string is solid, straight, completely connected. Whereas Kingdom Hearts is a Tetris block that all fits together. Make sense?
I'm not going to discuss that at this moment. Anyway.
Do you disagree?
I'm not going to discuss it at this moment, particularly because I have a small problem with that, and I will get to that in a little while.
The problem she has is the fact that when you have a Tetris block, and this is very good geek props to my sister, all the blocks go away.
I'm going to punch you.
See, all the blocks go away when you get a Tetris thing going on, and so it would be like saying there is no story. Ugh.
Okay, now, while he's dead, let's continue. I wonder how long he'll stay like that if I just don't res him. So, the other alternative is something that is serialized. Now, if you're talking about serialized as the apparent current definition of that, that means continuous storyline. However, in my mind, a serialized thing is a unique thing that is stuck in one small chunk and has no connection to anything else that may or may not be in that same universe or setting.
Brains!
Oh,
Oh, God. I had the most terrible nightmare.
You tried to eat me.
I dreamed I was John Romero. Oh. Hi. What were you talking about?
Who's John Romero?
No, don't stress it. Oh, for God's sakes. Zombie person. There, okay. That's all you need to know.
Oh, okay.
You were talking about procedurals.
Yeah, apparently the new definition for a serial, by the proper original definition, is now called a procedure.
It is worth noting these terms usually only refer to television, but they apply in the same manner to
Television
anything
is
else.
stupid and should be input into the internet, and that's the only format it should be allowed to be at.
That's practically already there, if you think about it. How much do you watch television on your television as opposed to on Hulu?
How much do I watch television on my computer?
Well, there was the entire series of Days of Our Lives that you watched the other day.
I don't even know what that is.
Keep going.
I do know what that is, but it was funnier for me to say I didn't.
Damn it. I should have gone with something she actually wouldn't know. Baywatch.
I actually know what that is, too.
Baywatch Nights. I'll admit I only know about Baywatch Nights because of Cracked. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you should go look up that article.
Nights.
It's hilarious.
According to Wikipedia, Baywatch Nights is an American police and science fiction drama series that aired in syndication from 1995 to 1997.
Yeah. Now, I want you to think about something for a moment, sis. You know what Baywatch is, right? You notice they mentioned sci-fi in there.
How the hell did Baywatch turn into...
Exactly! So anyways, that was the joke.
Where was I?
You were talking about definitions because you got hung up on the subject.
Definitions are stupid. Wrong definitions are stupid. The only correct definitions are mine, and the rest of the definitions can go...
Oh. Hey, what's up?
Stab my brother.
Ugh. Oh, God, I had this great hungering for brains all of a sudden.
Did you learn your lesson this time?
Yes.
Brains give you heartburn.
That's why I'm going to go to McDonald's next time.
Okay. Which arguably probably isn't any better. But at least you aren't a cannibal.
Well, I've been meaning to tell you.
When did they take over? Are they farming humans? Is
Yeah.
human the new beef?
Yeah. It's actually my fault. See, I suggested it because... Look, I was...
Is that where all the children from the orphanages have been going?
No, of course not. Those are working in the slave labor market.
Ah, okay.
I'm kidding. I would never do that.
Neither would I.
Yeah. Oh.
So...
Your brother's very uncomfortable. I'm going to get comfy while you talk.
So, the question here is preference toward one continuous story that goes on indefinitely, ideally, or something that is self-contained and told in small chunks.
Are you going to discuss the in-between?
And the grayscale that comes in the middle.
Well, one of the things I think is important to mention as far as the in-between, because this has come up with my videos recently, Star Trek in general is best described as an in-between, because each episode is effectively self-contained, right? And especially in some of the later stuff like Voyager, each episode completely ignores the continuity of the other episodes, but it is still set within the same setting continuity. It may not have story continuity, it may have very little character continuity, but it does maintain a degree of setting continuity. You know what I mean? You have any other good examples of that?
Something that the Pern series that we were discussing earlier.
Yeah, Anne McCaffrey's
Anne
Dragon
McCaffrey
Riders.
wrote a wonderful series that I absolutely adore, and Brother has read a good portion of as well that I just recently found out. Anne McCaffrey has an entire universe set on a world called Pern, and it is...
And it kind of got bad after a while. I'm sorry.
Admittedly, I only had access to it in the public library, and not only did I not get to read them in order, but I doubt I read all of them.
Oh yeah, they kept going for quite a while.
She eventually just stopped.
Thank God for that. Poor woman. I mean that sincerely, I feel bad for her. It's the Stephen King scenario. You just keep having to write a book every 8 months. It's going to burn you out, you know? I would hate to do that.
But anyway, the Pern series was something that the setting continued. What are you doing? I'm getting there, trying not to throw things on the floor.
I figured the secret was poking.
It's not.
No, okay.
The Pern series was a situation where each book was a story in and of itself, rotated around a set of characters that were unique to that story. And while you might catch glimpses of those characters in other stories, sometimes you might jump years in the future to another continent, to people that had absolutely nothing to do with it, to different generations, etc., etc., etc. You were never hearing the same story. You were hearing individual and unique, solely a part of that, solely a part of that one block that didn't have anything to do with anything else. And that is something that would be an in-between. Can you think of, Kingdom. Can you think of anything video game wise?
Shoot, I had one earlier.
You talked about Final Fantasy.
Well, no, Final Fantasy. That is a good point. I'm going to bring that up real quick. Final Fantasy is a good example of the procedural, that is to say, the segregate. At least it was for a while. Nowadays, the Final Fantasies have been connected, but even at that point, you don't have to have played Final Fantasy IV to understand Final Fantasy V, right? It's its own story. So those are actually a pretty good example of that kind of storyline done fairly, or that kind of approach to storytelling done fairly well, at least up to a certain point. But as far as an in-between in video games, that's actually a tough one. Because, see, I've actually heard the argument made that the Assassin's Creed stories can qualify as that, but only halfway. I don't know if you're aware of this, Sis, but there's actually two storylines within the Assassin's Creed series, right?
Okay.
There's the ones in the past with the people you're building, and the ones in the present or the future, or whatever. Yeah, and those two obviously are connected, but the ones in the future are literally a complete what I call the string serial. You know, it's literally 1-to-1.
Okay.
The ones in the past are not.
The ones in the past are like tied-ons.
Yeah.
From what I understand.
And they are
What about
relevant.
Mario?
Oh, okay. Well, no. Okay. She gives us a good one here. We're actually going to use the Mario RPGs specifically, because Super Mario RPG, Paper Mario 2, the Mario and Luigi series, and Super Paper Mario. If you bring up the sticker star, I'll kill you. All pretty succinctly exist within the same setting. They all reference each other. They all reference the same world and universe.
But they're all unique and separate.
With one exception, but I'm not even going to bring that up because it's not relevant. Other than that, they're all their own stories within the same setting continuity. So I think that's a good video game example. Good one. Good one, sis. You get an Eeyore hug.
What about Zelda?
Zelda. Well, see, that's an interesting one. Now that we know that the Zeldas are tied together because of the continuity. Do you know what I'm talking about with that?
Yes, actually.
Okay. It just suddenly occurred to me. I've never discussed this with Sis. But now that we know that the Zeldas are all part of the same continuity, that's probably another good example of that. Because with the exception of Ocarina of Time to Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time to Wind Waker to Phantom Hourglass to Spirit Tracks, and what's the other one? Link to the Past to Link's Awakening. There's like a couple others that are like one-to-one connections. So like the first game does distinctly have to do with the second one. But other than that, the Zelda series is all within the same continuity, but doesn't actually connect with each other in any overt way. So that's another good example of an in-between. A setting continuity is what I like to call that, personally.
So, getting into which we prefer. Or rather, I should say, the pros and cons of each, because I know he has a definitive preference toward one particular one, but I myself have a tendency more to not prefer a particular style or demand one or the other, but prefer them be done exceptionally well within their own way.
It's also worth noting I kind of agree with my sister on this, because even though I will be more kindly disposed towards the type that I like, which I'm not even going to tell you yet, if it's not done properly, I still prefer good execution to good fundamental structure, That's just me, though. So you go first, dear sis.
So first, let's discuss having a continuous story, the cliffhanger model.
Wait, hang on, let's get the cliff. Here we go. Wait, he's hanging. Right.
By his tail.
No! Don't. Tune in next time! And then I should totally stop the video, like, right there. Anyways, continue. Are you talking about the string continuity or the Tetris block continuity?
String continuity.
Okay.
Because Tetris block continuity is an in-between.
Well, it is a form of in-between, I'll agree.
It is not continuity.
Well,
It's not a one-to-one.
But
they may be things happen.
I'm not going to say anything, because I was using a bad analogy, and you're right. But the Kingdom Hearts that I was trying to use isn't an in-between. It very much is a solid storyline. I just wasn't explaining it properly.
Happens in a different order?
Yeah, basically.
So you have flashbacks and flash forwards?
Putting it to you very simply, okay. In order of production, it was Kingdom Hearts 1, Calm, 2, 358, Birth by Sleep, Recoded, Dream Drop Distance, right? In terms of continuity, it's Birth by Sleep, 1, Calm, 358, 2, So, yeah, that's a.
I'm stealing one of
it's
these.
still a 1-to-1.
Because my ears popped.
Whoops. Hello.
Yeah, I accidentally moved it.
It's still a 1-to-1. I call it the Tetris because instead of it being, instead of it being like this, it's presented kind of like this, and we have to put it together ourselves. Although I do like a story that makes you think like that, but I'm getting off topic. I like it. It's the new look. It's the new you, sis. Here's a trash can right there.
Now I'm trying to tell if my ear popped or not.
While she's doing that, I'm going to discuss one of the biggest cons that I've heard, legitimate cons, I'm going to say. And now, what I mean that, I'm not saying that, just because you don't like something, it isn't legitimate. But there is a difference between a legitimate grievance with something and this is my preference, right? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with preference, but it is easy for someone who even doesn't agree with this to recognize a legitimate grievance. You follow me? So, legitimate grievance with string continuity. If you suddenly get interested in, let's use probably one of the worst examples of this. This actually isn't string continuity, but let's just use this as an example, because this has been true for many, many years. Let's say you suddenly decide to get into Green Lantern comics, okay? Now, Green Lantern's a pretty good example as far as comics in general go, because the Green Lantern series has been pretty much a solid, contiguous story since about the time the death of Superman happened, give or take. So, that is... when did that happen? That was in the 90s. It's been a while. Actually, that was in the 80s, wasn't it? You're the one with the phone. No, don't look it up. Point is, we're talking at least bare minimum of 2 decades of solid continuity, right? String continuity. If you suddenly get interested in Green Lantern...
When did Superman die?
You can just look up Death of Superman, too. Death of Superman right there. Date, please. Sorry, pseudo-OCD mode. Yes, I know it's not really OCD. I know enough about OCD to know I don't have it. Sadly enough. 1992. There you go. 21 years, give or take. Now, that's a ballpark estimate, admittedly, but you get the point. If you wanted to get into Green Lantern comics, you are missing out if you just decide to start reading in the middle. Or if you start reading the new stuff. You can't really appreciate the whole of everything that's going on unless you go back. Now, that can be argued back and forth, but the point remains the same. The example my sister gave is even better. Let's say that Harry Potter series was still going on, because I personally got into the Harry Potter series at about 3. I'll admit that freely. The 3rd book came out, and that's the first time I really got into it. And then I had to go back. I had to go back and get book 1 and 2 because it was a string story. I had to do that if I was going to get into it. Imagine coming into it, and I know someone personally who did this at about book 6, who suddenly was like, "This looks really good. I want to get into it." They had to go back and get the last 5 books in order to appreciate the story.
I started at book 4, but I started because I was bought a box set for Christmas.
Ah, gotcha.
So I had all 4 there.
Actually, Mary gave me 1 and 2, but that's why I didn't read them. It wasn't until 3 came out that I actually... But anyways, point being, that's one of the very legitimate grievances you could lay at a string thing. You basically have to go back and appreciate. You start from the beginning in order to really appreciate all of it, right? Do you agree?
Yes.
Do you have any other legitimate grievances you could raise about string continuity?
I do.
What are they?
Well, if a string continuity is done well, it's engaging, it's well written, it's well presented, it pulls you into it, for lack of a better way to phrase this. With the Harry Potter books, the reason that you wanted to go back and read the first 2, or the first 5, or how at whatever point you started, is because you liked it, you were engaged in it, you didn't want to put it down, you wanted to know more, you had questions, you thought about it. It was engaging, for lack of a not as important as I'm, not as weighty as I'm looking for term. It was engaging. And that is a double-edged sword. You enjoy it more. But if you don't come in at the end, when it's finished, I came in at book 4. Okay, I finished reading books 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I sat there. Yeah. And I sat there. And I sat there. And I sat there. And I reread books 1 through 4 because a year went by.
Yep.
And if you remember, the gap, if I'm not mistaken, the gap between book 4 and book 5 was the longest between all of the books.
Yep. I assure you I remember that. Because...
And that in lies my biggest problem with a continuous story, is you are literally left hanging.
Mm-hmm. You are left wanting more. And while that could be considered a good thing, it could also be considered a very bad thing, for the exact reason we're just discussing.
It is a good thing if you are given the continuation within a reasonable amount of time. Now, that quote-unquote reasonable amount of time varies. For example, let's say you are reading a manga or watching an anime, and...
Oh, God.
I'm currently in this situation right now with about 13 animes, and I can only save 3, so I'm currently reading 3 manga. And yes, I'm not kidding when I say 13 anime. All of those are released, well, not all of those, the anime are all released on a weekly basis. At the end of each week, I get a new one. Now, that is a reasonable amount of time for me, because that gives me a week, in my opinion, to analyze the episode, go through it, think about it, come to a conclusion, expect what I want next, decide what I'm expecting next in the episode, why I'm expecting it, etc., etc., without me feeling frustrated over the length of time. With a book, that's going to be different. A book is far more in depth. You get far more at one time. You're not going to finish it in a half an hour. If you finish a book in a half an hour, oh my God, did you even read it?
Hey.
You couldn't have finished book 5 in a half an hour.
No, I couldn't.
Exactly.
Well,
so here's what I'm saying. A reasonable amount of time per genre, per setting, per length of what you're getting, etc., etc. Then I am okay with being cliffhangered. If I am waiting 4 months for the next manga, manga chunk, that's a bit too long for me, because there's not enough there to keep me engaged, to keep me wanting to read it. All that's doing is leaving me frustrated with not having enough. That's like giving you an appetizer and no food, no dinner, no dessert.
For an hour.
Yeah. We're going to whet your palate, and then we're going to leave you hungry.
Hell, that's terrible, because your body will actually start to biologically and chemically respond, too. And then you will get no food.
Exactly.
God. Now, you bring up an interesting point, my dear sister, that is mostly related to video games, but this is true across most genres. Indeed, I know a lot of people could say this about television as well. If you have an itchy head, remember, do it with a pillow. There we go. Now then. Love the hair. Very sexy. So, first of all, those of us who enjoy serial video games, if you forgive me for being a little bit honest about this, probably have it the worst. Because video game development time is not short. You know? So, even a book takes a little bit on the long side. Over a year, right? And Harry Potter's are a great example of that.
Yeah, a book you're looking at probably a year, maybe a year and a half.
Movies
you're thinking probably 2 to 4 years.
Which is also
Video
pretty
games,
bad.
you're upwards of, it might be a decade.
And it has been in some cases. Forgive me for pointing this out, but StarCraft Brood War ended on a cliffhanger. And then we waited, I don't know how many years, it was 11 or 12, I forget, somebody looked it up for me, before StarCraft 2 came out. Now that's hell, just speaking personally, because, we really wanted more, but now there's another, what?
I just thought of one.
What?
Warcraft.
What about it?
World of Warcraft and the Warcraft thingamajigger is an episodic...
Armors. Are you trying?
Yes!
Okay. Just making sure.
You can't tell by the fact that we're shaking right now. Okay, I give up. That hurts.
Okay. I'm sorry. You okay?
That's a horrible... Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. Okay, there we go.
Better?
It's not hurting there. It was hurting here.
Oh, whoop, sorry.
Because you were catching tricep. That hurts worse. Please stop. I've lost an arm.
Actually, I'm a paladin, blood elf male paladin, so it'd be more like whoosh, anytime I heal. There we go. Okay. That's not a bad example of that, all things considered.
There's continuous setting, but it is episodic.
Although lately...
The only continuity that is provided is through our characters.
True. Lately they've been trying to get more to a string thing, which I admittedly approve of, but ironically, we do still have the exact same downsides we were just talking about. Now, there is one other caveat that all fiction, all forms of fiction, all formats have, but I have noticed it most in video games personally, although again, television has this too. When you have a string continuity, or even the pseudo-string, the Kingdom Hearts thing going on, there's the possibility that the next episode might not be made. The next game might not be made. The next book, the next movie just might not happen, because that's life, if you'll forgive me for being blunt. I know a billion of you out there are going to be saying Firefly right off the top of your heads, but I got an even better example for you that's very recent. Darksiders. Now, Darksiders is not exactly the most epically awesome game series ever, but I liked Darksiders, and it was very much a string series. It was still building. Darksiders 1, fun, a lot of interesting plot, interesting character development. Darksiders 2, literally immediately connected and directly, and then it ends on a cliffhanger, and we're never going to see Darksiders 3 because of the THQ fallout and the company that bought them, who flat out said, we just bought this to bury this IP. That happens. I got another one for you, Homeworld. Now, okay, granted, we are finally seeing something that will be a spiritual successor to Homeworld, but Homeworld's over, and so forth and so on. That sort of thing happens. Okay, television example, Space Above and Beyond. That's a better example than Firefly, I think, because Firefly is more of the setting continuity, the middle ground. Space Above and Beyond was a string continuity, and then it chopped off. It's done, and that's been done for years. We're never getting any episodes of that. So that sucks when that happens. And so that is another strong, legitimate grievance, strong negative to having a string continuity, in my opinion.
If you can't finish it, then it's almost not worth doing.
And I can give one other example of two examples actually, of the aggravation my sister was just describing really quick. I know a friend of mine who started watching The Next Generation on an episode you may or may not have heard of called The Best of Both Worlds Part 1. Enough said, really.
There is not a Best of Both Worlds Part 2, is there?
Oh no, there is. But that was one of the longer summer breaks that they had in between episodes that they had for a while, because there was a bit of a issue going on behind the scenes. To summarize, there was a lot going on at the time.
Contracting issues, I'm sure.
But the point of the matter was that was probably the worst possible time to pick up the series, because they were like, okay, let's go back and rewatch season 1. Okay, this is sort of okay. Season 2, this is all right. Season 3, yeah. And then they just stalled. The second example happened to my friend Gary. I can't say this without saying spoilers, and I don't want to spoil anything, so suffice it to say, he was watching Bleach, the anime, and picked it up right about the episode in which something regarding Aizen happened. That's the first he saw of Bleach, and that's where the series was at when he picked up Bleach. He was so frustrated about that he put the series down for 2 years so it could catch up to the point where he could complete the story. And I didn't blame him, for that matter.
Yeah. Now, it is important to note that Bleach is one of those ones that it's an anime. The releases were coming a bit sporadically at the time because it hadn't yet reached popularity yet. It didn't reach popularity there until it hit season 2.5.
That was with the Spanish guys, right? No, I'm wrong. Because it really hit its popularity stride right about
when the Hollows came out.
Yeah, when the Hollows were big, because they were there from the beginning.
Yes, but when the Hollows really became a forefront of the story, that's when it reached popularity in the Americas. Yeah. And that's when English translation became
more accessible.
Steady is a good term for that.
I like more accessible, personally.
Beforehand, you were catching it on Cartoon Network. You were getting one episode a week, and then they would throw specials on, and so you wouldn't get your episode that week or whatever. Or the translation was just bad. Et cetera, et cetera. And it wasn't dubbed yet, it was only subtitled. So if you weren't if you can't read that fast, or if you have difficulties with, you had no access to it, so it wasn't popular. And it wasn't at the point at which he's talking about Gary joining, because when he said that, light bulb. I know. That's the...
Well, it could have been like 3 points in the story, so I wanted to clarify.
It's the tail end of season 1.
Okay.
Anyway, the tail end of season 1. So this was 2.5, halfway through season 2, which the Bleach seasons were running 26 episodes, I'm fairly certain. So, you're looking at least a year and a half later.
Yeah.
Before you started getting regular, every week, guaranteed episodes. You're texting while we're recording. Please put your phone down.
It was for medical reasons. The only reason I was doing it.
Okay.
And we're already done.
Okay.
And now it's on silent.
Okay.
And now I'm going to flap you. Any questions? Wait, let me reverse it.
Ow!
I don't know what to make of that. I'm gonna like try it in reverse backwards, okay?
Bonk.
Yes, okay, we have victory.
Nice hat. So anyway, I completely understand his frustration with Bleach at that time. Additionally, I as well gave up on it, but I gave up on it because I didn't have regular access to cable television in which to watch it on Cartoon Network.
Now, do you have any other detractions for string continuity?
Yes.
What are they? Because we haven't talked about pros at all.
Well, so far, let's see, we've discussed cliffhangers.
Cliffhangers are bad. We've discussed...
Length of time in between.
And you can't just jump in. You have
Sudden
to go back.
cutoffs. And you can't jump in.
And yeah, I guess sudden cutoffs is your possibility of it ending.
Yes, without a
without satisfaction.
The other thing that I'd like to bring up with it is...
There's an example of that.
well, now I've forgotten. So let's switch to pros.
Now, I got one pro... Now, I want to jump in, if that's okay with you, real quick.
Go ahead.
Now, those of you who know me at all know that this is my preferred style of writing. I prefer string continuity. There's one really big reason for that. What?
I don't think any one of your viewers understands that you like string continuity. I mean, there's only the Imperium, or whatever it's called.
I actually did a video about that, didn't I? I did a video called The Basics of the Imperium, where I discussed why it is that every story I've ever written in my entire life is part of the same continuity.
As well as every story that you've ever played, or watched,
or interacted
or interacted with. Including real life, by the way.
Including real life.
Real life is tied into the Imperium.
Yep.
You and I and him are all part of the Imperium.
Yep. And I know, yeah, let's just move on. So the point being, one of the reasons I can give as a, again, we're not going to get into preference. I already mentioned my preference. There it is. It's over there. But one of the reasons I can give as a legitimate reason why I prefer that is because to write a string continuity properly, and I do have to add that word properly, is much more difficult and takes much more work and thought and effort in than just doing the procedurals, than just doing the stories that aren't connected. You have to have, at the bare minimum, you need some kind of framework laid out, and you need to be able to be dynamic. Because let me give you an example of this. Babylon 5, JMS had pretty much the story written from ground one, right? But one of the things he did, and I'm not a lot of people I've talked to are aware of this, is he made sure that if things happened in real life, which they did, he would have a way to shift the story so that it could keep going. Because that's life. Stuff happens. You lose an actor, you lose a voice actor, you lose a writer, you lose a director, and you need to adapt to that. You need to adapt your story. And so he made it so that it was a great... My point is that I appreciate the extra effort involved. I appreciate the increased amount of, for lack of a better word, care that goes into the story's creation. And so that's one of my legitimate reasons why I like string continuity. It's one of my pros.
As I will readily admit to everyone, I don't have a preference. I don't give preferential treatment to one type or another. I won't...
Except for her brother.
What does that have to do with anything?
You don't give me preferential treatment?
No. It's not to say I don't treat you differently, but it's not preferential treatment.
my brother, I almost said my brother. My sister doesn't give me preferential treatment. I don't think she's buying it.
Are you done now?
Yes. Mostly because that hurts my neck.
Okay. So I don't have a preference one way or another. I am not going to be more favorably inclined toward one type of story or another. I am not going to be less likely to talk bad about it, or rather, I'm not going to be more likely to talk good about one that was not well presented, simply because it is of this one particular type of storytelling. Those of you who have listened to some of my story time with Xahns, of my own personal works, you will understand that I don't write in continuous stories. I have a hard time thinking that far in advance, I guess is a good way to put that. Mainly to the point that, I can't make 19 billion convoluted plots that all tie in together and all have a continuous and living world that are attached to them.
Meanwhile, her brother is incapable of writing anything else.
Exactly. He is incapable of writing anything that isn't attached to every other thing.
Which is a flaw, I'll admit. I really can't. I've tried.
It's not necessarily a flaw, it's just something that is not a strength. It's not something that's wrong, it's just something that you're not good at.
No.
Just like I don't think it's a flaw that I can't write things that are a continuous story. I write really well, very engaging. I point to Mother. Those of you who haven't seen it, go check it out. Storytime with Xahn, Mother.
It's actually it's on your channel, isn't it?
Maybe.
I don't know.
It is either on my channel or it is on Brother's channel.
I have a whole playlist with all her stuff, so it's either in there, which this video will also be in, or it's on her channel.
Yes, so.
I'll link it in this comment. You haven't listed a pro yet, my dear.
Yeah, you are correct. I was getting to the point that I don't have preferential treatment. Now, that being said, what I like about a continuous string story is a continuous string story goes into so much more depth about everything. You know more about the characters, you know more about the setting, you know more about the series of events, you know more about the background, you know more about the past, you know more about the future, you know more, you have more knowledge base about everything. That story becomes more real for you.
So there's a great deal more immersion, you would say.
Not necessarily.
I'm lost.
There is only as much color and immersion as the creator is able to put into it.
Okay.
And this leads back to my caveat of all things. It must be well done. We pointed earlier to Kingdom Hearts. We pointed to Harry Potter. We didn't point to, but I believe it deserves to be mentioned, Lord of the Rings. All of these are things that the world is incredibly rich and alive for us. These are instances where it was incredibly well written. But for every instance where this was well done, there are, I'd say, probably 3 to 10 instances where it has not been well done. An example of that, you have the Harry Potter series.
Yeah, that wasn't really well done.
And then you have the Twilight series.
Okay, hang on, guys. I gotta pause for a second. I want it known that our Shanghai does not support the acknowledgement of the existence of the Twilight series, so I didn't hear anything. Just saying.
Now, that being said, I personally enjoyed reading the Twilight series. Here's why. I have a fascination, an extreme curiosity, and an extreme enjoyment of supernatural beings told in different ways. And I feel that this was a very a very good, a very rich instance of humanizing something that we normally consider to be more beast. Both vampires and werewolves in this particular setting were humanized to a great extent. Now, whether or not I agree with that or not is a completely different thing. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing. As Brother said, it's definitely not his thing. And the movies are atrocious. But
yeah, even people who like the books don't like the movies.
Yes, I enjoyed the books. I don't like the movies. If you like the movie, chances are you're a 12 to 14-year-old girl. And the only reason you like it is because you think somebody in it is hot.
I know for a fact at least one girl who is in that age range who hates the movies.
Yes. But I'm saying if you do like the movies, chances are you're of that time frame. You are a teeny bopper who has just started having hormonal rages that say, "Oh my God, half-naked man on TV, and I can watch it, and my parents are okay with it. Oh my God, I just want to eat him." And you're wrong, because they aren't even that attractive.
Apparently, I didn't know this, but apparently teenage girls are cannibalistic. Why is this not something I haven't been aware of yet? God, I thought I understood women. Oh my God. Eeyore, I give up, okay?
Magus.
Okay, I understand.
Magus.
You just used my name.
You've used your name many times before. Someone in
Well.
Twitch chat the other day said, he also has blah for his alias, which we both ignored because it was your name.
Yeah.
But it's not your name.
Well, no,
But it is your name.
I have a few dozen names.
Exactly.
Like Eeyore. Look, I got a mohawk. Isn't that awesome?
Yes, that is very awesome.
I don't know if you can see it here.
So, you interrupted me.
You were talking about no, you weren't. You were talking about how for every instance it's done properly, executed properly, as I would say it, it can be executed improperly. I was actually trying to think of another example of that, and I was failing at it.
Nothing quite puts the point across like Twilight does.
No, it doesn't, but I really wish I could get a video game example out there. See, the problem is most of the games that I've played that are bad were back in the day when I could afford to play bad games, and you guys know what I'm talking about with that. When we were younger and finances weren't really much of an issue.
What was that one that you were talking about that they were doing a speed run where they were chasing each other and they copy and pasted the rooms?
Quest 64.
Is that an example?
No, because it's just one game. Thank God. If you guys like Quest 64, that's
See, the
your
problem with
business.
video games is if people didn't like it on the first one, they don't make the other ones they had planned.
Yeah, and the other problem with video games, and this is actually kind of funny, people tend to forget that video games, despite having been around for well over 30 years at this point, are still basically a new medium. Only relatively recently, I'd say in the last decade, have string serials, string continuity games really become a thing. You really have to look before that to find one that is, and generally you don't. I'll give you an example right now of one that some of you might say is an example of that, and I would argue fervently is not. Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2. Well, those are an example of the in-between, the setting continuity.
Mm-hmm.
They both exist within Faerun. They both have some degrees of dealing with each other. But Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2 only have one true plot element that connects them. That doesn't count, in my opinion. In fact, that's practically a setting thing, because it's the whole spawn of ball thing, you know? So, truly string gameplay is something that's much more recently.
They need to take the characters from the first into the second.
I mean,
and onward.
Here's another example. Fallout 1 and 2. Totally not a string continuity. That's definitely just same setting thing. The middle. We need a term for this in-between thing.
In-between thing?
Setting continuity is what I'm going to start calling it. Because I like terms, damn it. So we've got string continuity, setting continuity, and one-up. Wait, wrong mushroom.
I don't have a get big mushroom.
Well, we have a Goomba over there. Goombario! Goombario! Oh wait, he's in the... Yeah. Anyways. Now, it's also worth noting that a lot of video games, you could point to having string continuity, but they're only like too long. And that's actually a common thing. I don't want to start listing them because I just start listing a few dozen games, but it's true that you'll have like game A and then game B, and the two are directly contiguous, and then that's it, you know. The two big examples I've used are Assassin's Creed and Kingdom Hearts, and those are probably the most longest and well-executed versions of that I can think of off the top of my head. Coming up with one that's bad, I'm not sure I can.
So we'll just skip that.
So we'll just skip that. Let's talk about setting continuity. We've been talking about that anyways. Pros.
So setting continuity.
Or cons. Let's do cons first because we did that first.
Setting continuity is supposedly the happy medium between the two. You don't necessarily have to start at one specific point in order to understand the story. The example that we gave of this at the beginning would be the novel series Pern. If you start at the book that was written 5th in the series, you're just as well off as somebody who started at the book that was first or the book that was last.
Especially since the first book didn't really do that much except for establish the setting, if I remember correctly. Because that was the one where the very first woman becomes a dragon rider, remember? I can't think of her name.
Yes.
And she,
But that book wasn't written first.
No.
That book was written like 7th.
I know, but you get my point. At least I think you get my point.
Yes. The point is, if you started reading the series when she started writing the series, you didn't start at plot point 1.
Yeah.
You just read it as they came out. So you're in the same boat as I was, who started reading it after 7 books had been released. You just read the books as they existed, as you found them on the shelf at the public library, and you and I were no better or worse off. I didn't miss anything. You hadn't missed anything, despite the fact that neither of us had read them in order. And if somebody perchance went to all of the trouble to find out what, in that setting, they were in order chronologically, as opposed to the time period of the setting, not the time that they were written, and you read them in order chronologically, you didn't gain anything more or any less. You have no greater understanding of the world than I did, who started at 7, and you did, who started at the book that was written first, which I think that ended up being like 4 in the continuity of the setting.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what that one was called.
I don't remember.
Well, there was just Pern, and then there was Dragon Riders and Pern. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Pern was first.
Yeah, Pern was first, I'm pretty sure. First written. Production order is what we usually call that.
Yes. So this is where we're getting at with the
setting continuity.
Yeah, this is the one that I would refer to as like a Tetris block.
See, I could see that, but I would disagree because, in my opinion, the point that would be relevant here is not the Tetris pieces themselves, because of the stories.
Well,
it's the background, if you follow me. Does that make sense?
Yes, but my point on this one is that this is not something. It's a Tetris block because each piece, while it is part of the same. I suppose a better way to do this would be like Connect 5.
I still haven't played Connect 5.
Do you even know what Connect 5 is?
Guys, what's Connect 5? Message me now! No, I'm kidding.
So, anyway, Connect 5. You have this board that you're filling in, but it doesn't matter where you plop the pieces at any given point in time. As you're filling it up.
Okay.
Because you can start wherever.
Now, a good video game example that I already gave, but my favorite example, I think, is probably Fallout 1, Fallout 2, and Fallout New Vegas. All 3 of those very distinctly are within the same setting. All of them have strong setting continuity. The 3 of them only have the most threadbare amount of plot continuity. There's some, of course, but there has to be some. But there is actually the trump card of all setting continuities. Can you guess what it is, Sis?
What is it?
It is Star Wars.
Yes.
Because Star Wars basically crosses all mediums as of this point in time. Now, do keep in mind, when I'm referring to Star Wars, nowadays those words are kind of associated with a joke. A lot of people tend to forget that for several decades, Star Wars was awesome. We had Star Wars books, we had Star Wars video games, we had Star Wars comics. We had good stuff going on. Now, granted, most people would argue Star Wars video games didn't get good until KOTOR. I would disagree with that because I liked both Rebellion, known as Supremacy outside of the States, and I liked the TIE Fighter series. But that's neither here nor there. My point is, all of the Star Wars games, books, and movies were very much setting continuity. Only a few individual pieces could be considered string continuity, like the original 3 trilogy, for example. And even that could be argued that only Empire and Return are actually string continuity. And I could see that. I would disagree personally, but you get the point. So that's probably the example in my opinion, because Star Wars spans so much across all mediums, for that matter.
Now, the pros to this are that you get to learn so much more than you would in a string story about everything, because you're not just being told one plot point. You're being told what's going on here, what's going on there, what's going on here, what's going on over there. You're getting input from the world from many different points. So you aren't stuck to just, to put it in real world perspective, this is understanding news on a global level as opposed to understanding news on a local level or on a country level. You know, you are getting new input from everywhere, not just this is what's happening in my hometown.
I could see that. Now, one thing I'm going to also add as a pro is is a pseudo meta example. Speaking as a writer, if you were offered the chance to write the story for the next Kingdom Hearts game, you would have to be fundamentally aware of absolutely everything with regards to not just the setting, but the story. And this is something that my sister just hinted at, albeit briefly. In a properly done string continuity, you still have to keep setting continuity, because that's part of it, right? You can't have character continuity and not have setting continuity, right? So you have to do all the work of both, and you have to know everything about the setting, about the characters, about where the story's going in order to keep going with it, right? By contrast, if you were offered the chance to write, let me just use my example. If you were offered the chance to write a Star Wars story, you only have to know the extent of the setting, but on top of that, in knowing about the setting, there's still wiggle room, is kind of what I'm getting at here. You still have the ability to expand and broaden yourself. I mean, Timothy Zahn just basically proved this point way back when he did the Thrawn trilogy. He's basically the one who gave us Star Wars as awesome. Forgive me, but I know that can be argued. But the reason in my opinion, the reason the Star Wars Extended Universe is awesome is because of Timothy Zahn. He took the existing setting of Star Wars and grew it, you know? He kept it in continuity. He made everything make sense with everything that happened previous to that. And there was other stuff other than just the movies. But he expanded it. And that's the opportunity you have as a writer. And that's something we can enjoy as the readers, as the viewers, as the gamers. Because now we get to know more about Warcraft, for example. Because we already know Warcraft. We know Azeroth. But now we get to learn about this place over here. And we get to expand the way it's functioning. And we get to learn more about the way it's interacting in different ways than it had before. So I personally think that's another pro to the setting continuity.
Now, it is important to note that just because you started off with a string plot story does not mean that you can't expand outside that. Mm-hmm. Video games is a good point to pull with this one. If you have a successful video game, but you wrapped up your plot point in the first one, all you have to do is take that same setting and go to another one.
I would argue KOTOR 1 and KOTOR 2 are a perfect example of what she's talking about. Because KOTOR 1, I know you don't understand fully, pretty much full circled the story. It left some dangling plot threads, but it did that on purpose. It did that to leave some doors open. But the story was over, you know. KOTOR 2 then took some of the threads, took the setting, did another story with it. Awesome story, by the way. I know some of you disagree with me on that, but, you know.
The next point that I'd like to pull up that I think is a good thing that happens in these type of stories is what he just said. You're not limited. You can grow it. But also, when you have this, when you have these multiple plot points told from multiple perspectives, you aren't as frustrated with cliffhangers. And the reason is you know more. So you're either able to fundamentalize what would happen in other points, or you already can guess where it's going because you know more about the politics of the world, etc., etc. You are more immersed in a story that you know more about. Now, I'm going to repeat this 3 times tonight, because that's the exact same thing I said about the first plot point. When it is done well, when it is well presented, it answers questions.
Don't worry, I'll
But it not only answers questions, it gives you questions. ends. It makes you want more, but it doesn't frustrate you. It gives you answers, but it makes you think.
Now, we haven't talked about cons to setting continuity, my dear.
The big con to setting continuity and not plot continuity for me are something I'm sure you're going to bring up. Most of the time, those plots, not most of the time, but there are instances, and they are rather frequent, where the particular plot in your story will feel rushed or incomplete, or like something was skipped, or something wasn't fully explained, because you don't go fully in depth into this one plot thread. Sometimes things don't make sense. They don't mesh. You know, you'll get from here, and then you'll get here, and you just don't know how. Or you'll get to the end, and you finish the plot thread, and you instead of having that aha, murder mystery, aha, he's the killer. You get to the end and you say, what? Why did he get? I was sure it was that. How did he even make sense? You, the reader, you, the viewer, you, the gamer, you know, in a murder mystery style one, that's the bad guy, that's the killer. But in these episodic plot continuity ones, you might get to the end and you might not understand because it didn't wrap the plot up fully, or it didn't fully explain parts of the plots, or it hurried through things.
I could see that. It's also worth noting, I'm sure some of you are probably already thinking this, that a lot of the pros and cons of setting continuity and string continuity are very similar. Let me give you an exact example of what I'm talking about, okay? There's a series of books, The Spectre of the Past and The Hand of Thrawn, I believe. It's the Hand of Thrawn duology. Those books are still setting continuity, right? They still have to do with Star Wars. They still have to do with the plots that have been going, blah, 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 right? Here's the catch. Just like with a string continuity, if you are not aware of all the things that he's wrapping up, referencing, or tying into throughout those books, your enjoyment is lessened, and you find yourself just wondering, well, who's this guy, and who's Borsk Felia, or however the heck you say his name, and who's Captain Palayan, and except now he's what? I don't understand. You don't get it as well, and so that is still something that can affect a setting continuity. Let me give you a more direct example. While you can play Fallout New Vegas without having played Fallout 1 and 2, I almost guarantee you're not going to enjoy it anywhere near as much because you didn't play Fallout 1 and 2. You're not familiar with the setting. So it's the same basic con, just in a different aspect of it,
Rather than not understanding the characters and the setting, you're at square one with everyone else on the characters, but you're lacking the background information that you had from the prior knowledge.
Now, it is worth noting, to completely contradict that, or contrast that rather, to use the exact example I just gave, if you played Fallout New Vegas first, then you could still go back and play Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 and enjoy them. Hell, you could start with Fallout 2 and then New Vegas and then 1, or you could go with 3 to 2. You get my point. It doesn't matter the order, because while the timeline still changed, the stories are sufficiently unconnected that the only thing that really matters is the setting. So there is that as well. Anything else to add to setting continuity?
I don't really have any more cons on.
I have one more thing I want to talk about just briefly. I know some of you hate me for indulging in this, but the Imperium is primarily setting continuity. Virtually all the written works I write do have something to do with the setting, I am adamant in my writing that making sure that it makes sense within the setting, but it is extremely rare that I have string continuity within my storylines. There is a plot, one massive millennia-long plot that's going throughout the entire Imperium that is very distinctly a string continuity, but everything else that's written in that is pretty much 99%.
It branches off.
Yeah, it branches off. It's setting continuity instead of string. So it's something, and speaking from, I guess I could point this as a con, especially as a writer. the more it goes on, Star Wars is a good example of this too. The more it goes on, the more there is you have to know to write for that. The more there is you have to know to get to accommodate for, to add in or make sense. Because, as I mentioned in my first comment, one of the things that I personally like most about continuity, I know several people agree with me, I don't know if you do, is the idea that it all makes sense. It fits together. Now, I know that's basically the definition of continuity, but you get my point. The point of continuity is to make it fit together. And so, while you have to put out that extra effort, it's so much more satisfying when you do, at least for me. So I guess that's a con and a pro at the same time. Anything to add to that?
I can't write that way.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I give hugs.
Do you think my works are any less?
They're terrible! That's why I need that one up you're about to throw at me. Damn it, she's on to me.
I was too. I was like, I'm going to throw...
Now let's talk about procedurals, aka one-offs, aka Star Trek the Original Series.
AKA the real serial.
They're actually called procedurals because you see what's on you. You go first, because you know you like that kind of story more than I. You know, actually, I'm going to go first because I want to get a disclaimer out of the way. I mentioned this in one of my Star Trek videos. I freely admit that I prefer continuity of setting or string variety to the point where I will actively like a story less, or a setting less, or a series less, or whatever, when it does not have continuity. It will actively get to me, and even if it's well done, like my sister has repeated several times, I will enjoy it less because it is not contiguous, and I admit that is a thing for me. That's just a preference thing.
It is noteworthy that this, with him, only applies to things that have multiples of it.
Like Star Trek is a good example. When Voyager actively ignores its own continuity, that bothers me, you know?
However, if you throw something at him that is a one-shot and was intended to be a one-shot, can't think of a video game example.
One-shot video game. God, I don't know.
That you enjoyed. Something that doesn't have prequels or sequels.
Give me a minute. Keep going while I think about it.
Anyway, that sort of thing, you know, a movie, a book, or whatever that is just, this is it. There's nothing else. He's not going to actively dislike that simply because, oh, there's only one of it. Where's the rest of the story? Because that is the story.
Yeah, she's absolutely right. I'm just failing at coming up with a good example. I could argue that the Jurassic Park movie is a good example of that.
There's more than one Jurassic
There are
Park.
more than one Jurassic Park movies. Except, no, they're not. We're erasing them from existence. There we go. So, as I was saying, the Jurassic Park movie is a good example of that. I'm actually going to, even ignoring the hand wave and the Q snap, I do think that's a good example.
Snap.
Well, I like the Q snap better.
Yes, well, you just Q snapped it back into existence.
Anyway, so as I was saying, I do think Jurassic Park is a good example, because let's, seriously, even ignoring 2 and 3 entirely, because I didn't know 2 and 3 were coming out when 1 came out. I liked Jurassic Park the movie a lot. It was actually a great movie. I still enjoy that to this day. I know some of you are probably going to flame me in your life for that because of how different it is from the book, and I know that, and I've read the book too. Let's not get into that. The point being, even though it was one story, even though it was one thing, it was awesome. It does not it did not have to have setting or string continuity. It was one story. It was still awesome. I still enjoyed it. So she is quite correct on that. I can't come up with a game example off the top of my head. Okay, Planescape Torment. There we go. There's your example. You've never even heard of that, have you? Yeah, Planescape Torment. Yes, I know technically, you know, it's part of the Planescape setting, but that's irrelevant and you know it. So don't argue that. No technicalities here. Continue, my dear, because you have much more to say about this topic than I do. Hang on, I muted her. Give me a moment. Hang on, I gotta turn the volume up even harder. Yeah, okay. I'm going to tickle you if you don't start talking. I'm not ticklish. You can't get me with this, kiddo. Okay. I didn't silence you, though, with the Q snap. When? Okay, fine. We're gonna do it with the zero clap, okay?
Okay.
Now then.
He Q-snapped my vocal cords away.
No, I didn't.
He accidentally did. It happens periodically. He'll Q-snap and try and get rid of something, and for some unknown reason it just makes... One time he Q-snapped my big toe away.
Okay, I apologize for that, okay? I really didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry.
You know, you terrified Jacob. Is that his name?
I don't know.
The 4-year-old.
Your 4-year-old and my 4-year-old.
Sandra's.
That would be Joseph.
Joseph. You terrified Joseph because you Q-snapped his nose away.
Hey, in fairness, he had an awesome time for the next couple days while I got around to fixing him.
So, anyway. You know what? I'm going to start with the cons on this one.
Because there are so many. Sorry.
There really aren't.
No, there aren't.
The cons can literally all be erased by saying, when this is done well.
Yeah. There's no feeling of...
However...
Investment is the word I'm going to use.
I'm going to throw something out that is a personal issue that I particularly have with it.
Okay.
Now, I don't mind so much if you're going to throw random video games at me that have nothing to do with one another, or random books, or random anime episodes, or random whatevers. If you want to write things, and you want them to be separate stories, so be it. I don't care if you're the same person releasing the same thing with the same name. Just don't try to market it to me as a prequel or a sequel.
Oh God, I'm an idiot. I thought of an example.
What's that?
Final Fantasy. Any.
There you go.
God, I can't believe I didn't think about that. I was saying, because I mentioned this earlier, the Final Fantasies, up until recently when they started actually connecting them, were, it was, they had sequels, but it didn't matter. When you played Final Fantasy IV, it was one story within itself. Don't talk to me about the last story. We're not getting into that. Let's use 5 as an example. No, let's use 6, because it's never done anything Gaiden with 6. FF6 was FF6. It was one story. It didn't have a sequel. It didn't have a prequel. It didn't have a book. It didn't have an ancillary work. It was just FF6. And yet, as you guys know, FF6 is my favorite fictional work of all time. And I do not say that lightly. So, I'm going to poke you so hard.
Did you notice you started speaking in cadence to the whistling?
Of course I did, because I can't help but do that, because I'm an idiot. I should get music going. No, I'm not going to do that. Continue.
My problem with this lies in when you try to market me something as a continuous story and there are no connection points to the pieces.
Like Star Trek Voyager.
Now,
I just keep bashing that show, don't I?
Yes, you do, which is really funny because you generally like.
Yeah. I'm going through season 2 right now, which is the bad stuff, so I'm
That's
kind of...
probably why.
Yeah.
And plus the pain and everything
Yeah.
else. So, here's something that I have a problem with, okay? You release an anime, or a manga, depending on which form you're getting it in.
Yours Adventures.
And you are calling this season blah of blah anime.
Yours Adventures.
Right?
Yours Adventures.
What?
Yours Adventures.
Ah, okay, so we are going to see the anime of Eeyore's Adventures. Now, episode 1 you get, and it's got Eeyore in it, and it's a standard episode 1 of a new anime. Introduction to the main character.
He's secretly a robot that also turns into a teenage girl with a schoolgirl outfit that has a small cat that's very cute and shoots blood out of his nose. Did I hit them all?
Yes.
Okay. So that's episode 1.
Now,
episode 2. Whoops.
Episode 2, you don't see anything of Eeyore. Instead, you have Chomp. Okay. Okay, I can go with this. Okay. Surely you're introducing to me another of the main plot characters. Now, episode 3.
Wait, I got an episode 3 right here.
No, you don't, because that's the same video game.
Oh,
episode
you're right.
Episode 3, you have Mr. Frog. Or Miss Frog. Is this a girl or a guy?
That is masculine.
Mr. Frog. Mr. Lavender Frog.
He's very masculine.
He is very secure in his masculinity. And you're being talked to about Mr. Frog, and you see this, and you get through all 13 episodes of the season, and never once do you see Eeyore, Chomp, or Mr. Frog connected in any way. And in fact, you may or may not see those characters again in a future episode further down the line. What you have just done is thrown at me a series of one-shots and called it a season.
Now, I can give a video game example of what she's talking about now.
Go ahead.
The Final Fantasy name was very popular for quite a while there. And so one of the things Square at the time was doing, which I fervently disagree with, by the way, to prove that I didn't just start hitting Square when they added NX to the end of their name, is they would name other games that had nothing to do with Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy. Now, this isn't a perfect example, but for example, Seiken Densetsu 1, which is another continuity. It's a whole setting continuity series over there. And most of you probably know Secret of Mana, which is the second game in the series. Seiken Densetsu 1 came out as Final Fantasy Adventure. Branding, which is exactly what you were talking about. They branded it as a Final Fantasy game just to sell out on the cash out in the name and try and make it look like it was the same thing. Final Fantasy Legends 1, 2, and 3 were all part of the Saga series, completely irrelevant. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, yeah, I know most of you don't like that game, but I actually really like that game. Another good example, they just called it that to cash in on the FF name. And to be a little bit blunt, that's actually part of what the FF series itself was doing for quite a while there. And without question is the reason they still have such a thing as Final Fantasy, if you'll forgive me for being cynical for a moment, is because they're just doing that exact same. They're trying to sell you on the idea that it's still Final Fantasy, when it is not. Make sense?
Yes.
Anything else to add?
And that is when I have a problem with the disconjointed singular serial episode blocks. Now, if you want to throw me a one-shot manga, I read one-shot mangas all the time. You know what? I love them because 15 minutes, I'm in, I'm out. I've got this cute little story that I've just read. Generally, it gives me a little bit of a laugh. Sometimes it might give me a little bit of an awe. Sometimes it might, introduce a little bit of a bittersweet feeling in me. But they're cute, short, one-time read that takes rid of a boring wait time. While I'm, in line at the cashier at the grocery store.
Okay.
Because I randomly decided to go to the grocery on Saturday when it was busy.
I'm so sorry. I've done that.
But you see my point here. I don't have a problem with it if you're marketing this to me as a one-shot, as a this is this, rather than as a, oh hey, this is something that it should all tie in together at the end. Now, I don't mind with an anime or a manga series or whatever. A book, for example. I don't mind if you take the first 4 chapters to introduce to me the different characters that are eventually going to lead into a plot. And you can even leave one character off on its own where you just have these periodic chapters that are just that person, if that person ties into the overall plot thread at some point. A good example of this would be the Poisonwood Bible. That story, a really good read, very complicated read. I don't recommend it unless you are ready to sit down and devote your time to reading it and thinking about it so that you can fully understand it. Because if you don't, it's not going to make any sense to you, because it's told from the perspective of at least 4 different people. I think it's actually told from the perspective of 5 different people. Now, those 5 people are all telling the same story, but they are not telling it in any particular order, and they are not telling it from the same particular viewpoint. And how they view the different sequence of events that have happened over this time frame are completely different, because one of them is writing this story from the perspective of her adult self looking back on it. One of them is writing the perspective of the story as their adult self as it was happening. One of them is writing the perspective of a child's self as it was happening, etc., etc., etc. And it is extremely complicated, but every single one of those 5 different stories are the same story. And that continuality is what makes it worth it. So, if you want to market me different stories and you want to put them together as a package, you need to tie them in together. If you don't do that, all it's going to do is have... The reason I talked about this with an anime first is because I don't remember what it was, but I kid you not, at the beginning of last year, so at this point 2 years ago, almost, I watched an anime series, and God help me, I can't remember what it's called.
That was a
I can't
really
even tell you
name.
what a plot point it was, so that you could go look it up, because it was literally a 13 episode season where not a single episode tied into any other episode. Not one. But it was marketed not as a conglomeration of one-shots. It was marketed as a story. And that frustrated the hell out of me. Now, to talk about something that I think is good about this, because like I said, I wanted to get the negative out of the way on this.
Wait, before you do that, I want to toss one other thing real quick, if
Okay.
it's okay. I wanted to give you guys a couple more examples of what we're talking about. I'm going to save the example for last, because I only got a couple here. There's a video game called 3D Dot Heroes. It's on the PS3. It is definitively a one-shot game, and it is absolutely fantastic. It doesn't try to pretend like it's anything else. It's just one game. Another one on the DS. It's called The World Ends With You. Again, one shot. Not a part of series, no setting, no whatsoever continuity, but nevertheless a very good game. Very anime, unfortunately, and you guys know I don't really care for that much, but...
He doesn't like the art style.
Despite that, and the story style was very... here we go. World Ends With You, it's right there.
Yeah, I know. I actually thought about buying that. I might steal it for me to play it.
Make sure I have the thing in here. Anyways, my point being, despite the fact that it was a single one-shot story, which I generally don't care for, and... the other things against it was still nevertheless a very good game. But the example, in my opinion, of what we're talking about with regards to a complete procedural that has no setting continuity and no string continuity whatsoever, is the Twilight Zone. Do you agree?
I hate the Twilight Zone.
Do you agree, though?
Yes.
Twilight Zone, each episode is 100% segregate from the others. Literally nothing to do with them. Now,
the only continuity that you could even come up with is that it all happens within the Twilight Zone, and that is too weak of a link for me.
Now, I personally actually like some of the Twilight Zone. I have often said my opinion of the Twilight Zone is thusly.
Admittedly, I've never watched a single episode. I don't like the idea of it.
There are episodes that are jaw-droppingly incredible, even to this day. They have aged very well. And then there's episodes that are jaw-droppingly terrible. And in my opinion, there's not really much in the middle. Now, I'm talking about the original Twilight Zone, by the way, just to make that clear. But my point is, the Twilight Zone is pretty much the example of this. Even though it's all called the Twilight Zone, there is nothing connecting these things together. And that would bring me to my next point, but I'm going to let my sister keep talking before I get to that point. So continue forth, my sister.
All right, is it another con?
It's both.
Okay, because I'm moving into pros.
Would you like me to go, or would you like to go?
You may go.
You sure?
Yes.
Okay. I consider this literally both a con and a pro, and the reason I mentioned Twilight Zone is that's probably the best example of it I could think of right now. Any given episode, game, book, whatever, that's completely by itself is either going to be good, medium, or bad on its own merits. That's basically what it comes down to in a nutshell. You do not have anything that is going to predisposition it, or any of the viewers or gamers or whatever, towards thinking of it positively or negatively. You stand on your own two legs, or you fall on your own two legs, And like I said, that's both a pro and a con, but it is something that can, especially again as a viewer, a gamer, a consumer, it is interesting to look at and see, potential possibility, because I actually took a bit of a risk with The World Ends With You, for example, and ultimately nothing really swayed me. Yeah, Tetsuya Nomura, yeah, some of the teams from E Square, none of that actually changed my opinion. It was its own game, all on its own. Why are you eating my one-up?
My one-up. You bought that for
Why are
me.
you eating my one-up? You're right, I did. You never named him, did you?
I did. I just can't remember his name right now.
You forgot his name?
Yes.
Hang on. Let me put this into your brain, and then your brain memory will one-up. And then you'll remember his name. Well, she remembers that. My point I'm trying to get to here is that while it is a bit of a risk, it's not, okay, let me contrast this, okay? If I pick up a Kingdom Hearts game, I automatically assume it's going to be positive. That may or may not be true. And if it is a negative, I'm going to be more negatively affected by it than I would if I had no preconception of it. You know what I mean? Let me give you actually a much better example of this. Mass Effect 3, I walked into expecting it to be at the least good, and I was wrong. And that made it much worse than it would have been otherwise.
I thought it was good up until the ending.
It's complicated. But net negative, easily net negative. If I walk now, if I am picking up a game that has the Call of Duty label now, and I do got to stress now because there was a time when that was actually a quality label, but in the modern era, if I picked up a Call of Duty label, I expect it to be bad, for better or for worse. So
meaning he's not going to pick it up.
Oh yeah, but if I did,
if you bought it for him,
and it turned out to be good,
you would expect it to be bad.
Here's a better one. If I was looking at the Witcher series, yeah, I know you're going to hate me for this, and no, that doesn't reset the timer. Then I would look at that, automatically assume it's going to be something I don't enjoy. You follow? So
it's the reason you own it, and it's just sitting there,
not even installed. Anyways, but the point is, that's something you basically bypass completely with a standalone. Now continue, my dear, because there's one last thing I want to bring up, and I want to let you finish first.
So, I like standalones. I like standalones because they give me a relatively quick and easy immersion into a world I'm not familiar with. I am a creative person by nature. Something I've told you, I've told some of the viewers here, and something I've discussed with my brother, actively how I put myself to sleep at night, how I wind down, is I create stories in my head. I've done it ever since I was a little kid. That's just how I put myself to sleep, by going into depth thinking about something that I'm creating. Normally that would wind someone up, but for some reason it seems to calm me down.
That does the opposite to me.
I like one-shots because they give me a unique and new perspective into a world I've never seen. Now, for those of you who don't know, the creative process isn't something that you can start off from with a blank slate. You can't, the reason that you don't see children in elementary school writing masterpieces, painting masterpieces, isn't because they haven't developed the technical skills to. It's because they don't have the experience and the depth and the width and the weight of their creative instincts. You can only create something which you have drawn from your own personal experiences.
I agree.
And those experiences include not only the stuff that you yourself have done, but everything that you have ever read, talked about, seen, or otherwise interacted with. Every story that you have ever encountered, whether it's something your grandpa told you when you were 3 or 4 years old, up to a book that you were forced to read in high school, or a paper you were forced to write in college, or a play that you happened to go see because your girlfriend dragged you to it. All of that gives you a knowledge and experience base upon which you draw to create new worlds.
I'd agree with that.
And therefore, I like one-shots. I like one-shots because, like I said, they give me glimpses through windows I've never opened.
What about that one?
I haven't opened that window. Okay. But I know what's outside it.
Are you sure?
Yes, because I've been on the other side.
She's got friends on the other side. Sorry. Do you even get that?
There's a song, but I think you weren't doing the tune right.
That's because I'm tone deaf and I don't have the music going right now.
Okay. So anyways,
Sorry.
that's point A. Me personally, I like stories of any form, variety, or otherwise. One-shots generally have a tendency to be shorter. You realize I'm probably off camera.
I'm going to fix it. Hang on. Keep talking.
I like them because they're shorter and I'm able to read more of them, is a good way to put it. You know, a one-shot manga I can get through in 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the length of it. And then, you know, a book, you know, a one-shot book, I'll generally finish that in a day. You know, the 2-inch thick hardbound book, you know, I'll finish that in maybe 2 days, now that I have a baby. But, you know, I go and I watch that, or I read that, or whatever. You know, you go to the movie theater, you watch a movie. You give them 2 hours of your life, and you get all of this knowledge back. You go to the store, you buy a book, it's a one-shot, you read the book, you're done with the book. You can go in, and at that point, that world, you no longer have to read or watch or wait for that world to keep growing. You yourself can take that world and you can grow it inside your mind. Now, your world may not be the exact picture of what the original author, the original creator, envisioned of that world, but at that point that becomes your world, not theirs. It becomes its own unique and specialized thing. It is an existence in and of itself.
Okay.
And I like that creative freedom that having a one-shot gives to me. Now, that's not to say that a continuing story or a continuing setting don't give me that sort of freedom, because they do. All 3 of these give me that, and that is why, in and of that right there is the reason why I don't have a preference. Because what I'm looking for when I watch a movie, when I go read a book, when I see an anime, when I play a video game, is a glimpse into that world that I can take and I can grow and I can make use of in my own creative experience.
Okay, I can see that. Now I have a question for you, my dear.
Yes.
With regards to commercialized media in the modern era, I'm trying to think how to phrase this properly. See,
he has to think about how to phrase things, because I think very literally. So he's going to phrase it, and then I'm going to have to ask him what he means. He's trying to skip that me asking him what he means step.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll just start. In the modern era, it has been often said that one of the things that happens too much is we see too many reboots, too many...
Reboot the cartoon?
I now have to kill you.
I'm sorry.
I have to kill you on camera even. Oh my god, hang on. I'm going to beat you to death with a 1-up for irony value. Is that okay? Can I?
I don't want to get blood on it.
One of the things that a lot of people have made a comment on, a little bit too much complaining about, if you'll forgive me for being blunt, is that there's, everyone's constantly, it's either a sequel or a reboot or a rehash of an existing IP. There's no new IPs, right? That is an exaggeration.
Well, it could be argued that there are only 4 different stories that can be told.
I know. That's neither here nor there. I agree with you. But I think even if you were to look at that and ignore the technically that my sister just brought up, that's still an exaggeration.
I'm sorry, high school came back to smack me in the ass.
That's quite a feat since you're sitting down.
Smack you in the ass.
I am also sitting down.
Smack us both in the face.
Ugh!
Ugh!
Okay. But my point I'm trying to get to here is that while I have often been the kind of person... This is not sticking. While I've often been the kind of person who...
Want me to help?
No, it's this one's dead now. Who appreciates and indeed applauds an attempt to increase setting or string continuity within a video game series or a book series or a movie series or whatever, it doesn't matter. That is not to say that I am not against the idea of new IPs. The problem is it seems like more and more as time goes on, I shouldn't even say seems like, because this is true, because I understand economic theory. It is more risky to try a new IP, especially now in the current era. About a decade ago, new IPs were kind of a thing, and a lot of new stories and settings cropped up. And now we're still going through with those settings because people like me want continuity with that. But the problem is, like I said, it is too risky to keep doing new IPs now. There is so much risk involved that most people just accept grinding out something else similar to an existing IP. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because we can still have, as my sister has said several times tonight, quality. We can still have a well done or an exceptionally done work of an existing IP. But what I want to ask you, my dear sister, is your opinion in this whole thing. Should we continue to go forward in this atmosphere?
I think both ideas have merit. I like new things, but one other thing I like is I like to see the same story told differently.
Okay. Could you give an example?
Fairy tales.
Okay, I could see that.
I am a big fan of fairy tales. Now, when I say fairy tales, I don't mean the originals. I love the originals.
I don't.
No, I do. I love reading that. But I don't just mean Disney. I don't just mean Brothers Grimm. I don't just mean the new form. I mean all of it. I like to see how a new person can take and can pull the story of Snow White and turn it into this.
Was that the movie that came out recently? Was this year or last year?
Yes, there have been several Snow White movies that have come out.
It was pretty recent.
It was like 2 years ago. I haven't actually seen it yet.
I saw it only because the glass effects impressed me.
Please don't tell me.
That was the positive thing about the movie.
Well, I still plan on seeing it.
I don't blame you, but I'm serious. The glass effects were awesome.
I was actually referring to the
Little Red Riding Hood?
TV show.
Oh, that. Gotcha.
Whatever it's called.
I don't remember.
But anyway, I watched several episodes of the TV show. Not because the TV show had any interest for me. The TV show was stupid. It was not well done. I don't like it. But because the concept, the idea, was interesting. The idea of, rather than the Wicked Queen, rather than her trying to kill Snow White, she gave up on that idea and decided to ruin the happiness of everyone.
Because if you're going to react, why not overreact?
Well, she knew that killing Snow White was a futile effort, so she was going to try a new avenue.
Gotcha.
It was great. It was a great creative liberty taken with the original story, because the Evil Queen's whole plan is to ruin Snow White's happiness and to take all of that happiness for herself. Now, the point in that is, to ruin Snow White's happiness, what she did was she stuck Snow White in a menial job, paralyzed, put into a coma her Prince Charming, and took her child.
Wait, this is the child now.
Literally ripped everything that Snow White had worked so hard for away from her and got rid of it.
And then Snow White came back with a shotgun and... Wait, I'm misremembering, aren't I?
Wrong one.
Okay, my bad. Sorry, guys.
So, that's my point. That was a really interesting concept. That level of character development on the villain's side was fascinating for me. Now, I don't think it was well done. I think the story was good, but I don't think it was well presented.
Now, my sister brings up an interesting point, too. I've mentioned this myself. I don't mind... Okay, a lot of people tend to be what they refer to as purists, all right? I actually know someone personally who is a purist about X-Men comics, for example, and doesn't like it when they stray too much from the source material. I've always actually really appreciated creative interpretations of an existing material, with the obvious caveat. It's the one we've repeated 7,000 times tonight.
It has to be well done.
Good example. I'll give you a direct example, okay? Star Trek, the 2011 one, the first Abrams one, I actually liked that. I thought it was an interesting take on Star Trek. It had at least enough feelings of the original, and it was alright. I liked that. I wouldn't rate it as like one of my favorite movies ever, but it was definitely a good movie.
Worth watching.
Second one, Into Darkness, no. Again, it was basically trying to take Wrath of Khan and turn it into reinterpret it, to do it in a different manner. And it failed miserably. And I've already talked about this. I did my whole rumination about the movie, so I'm not going to go over details. But the point is, even though it was the same basic thing, taking an existing idea and reimagining it, it did it poorly. Let me give you an example of something that I don't like personally, but I will never discredit because it was well done. The new Battlestar Galactica was a complete reimagining of the original series. Now, I hated it, but that's just because it's my preference. I will never argue that it was poorly done. It was, in fact, extremely well done. You know, do you have any good examples off the top of your head?
I will give an example that those of you guys may or may not be well versed in this. There is a story that the plot line of which is you have these 3 or 4 or however many very attractive males, and they are living in a house. Just listen, it's a plot thread.
Okay, I'm listening.
And they are asked / required to / put in a situation where they cannot refuse to do so. Take this girl who is a country bumpkin, a wallflower, whatever phrase you want to put on it. She is not what would be considered mainstream attractive.
Okay.
And they are asked to turn her into a beauty.
Ah.
And a time frame is established, etc., etc., etc. Now, that story I have seen in the last 6 months, I kid you not, retold at least 5 different times.
Wow.
2 of them were books. 1 of them was a indie-style TV show, i.e. a not popular TV show. And 2 of them were anime.
It could
or
be
an anime / manga. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it could be argued that this is a very old story, too, because The Taming of the Shrew
is arguably the same story.
Yeah. Not that I like Shakespeare, but I am well versed in it, unfortunately.
But you see my point here. This is a taking the same, literally the same story, and reimagining it and telling it as a new story.
You know what? I've got an excellent example of this, if you'll allow me.
Go ahead.
I don't have specific examples right now, so forgive me. But music, okay? I'm not even talking about basic music theories and the theory that all songs are the same. I'm not even getting into that crap. Let's just ignore that. What I'm talking about is that there are several songs that have been redone, reimagined, touched up, etc. over the years, and in some cases, the artist will take it and really do something with it. All Along the Watchtower is probably a good example of that. I'll give you a specific example. But at the same time, other cases of individuals will just take the song and do a cover of it and not change anything. And that's not actually working. And I can really explain this simply by using an analogy.
Christmas carols.
Yeah, Christmas carols is a great example. But let me explain this with a very simple analogy, okay? Let us say you have to do a report on this game, because it happens to be right here, okay? Now, let us say that you have 2 people, my sister and myself, doing a report on this game. I'll go ahead and be the bad guy, just to make this easier on you, okay? I'm going to go to the Wikipedia entry for this and copy-paste it into my report and get rid of the notations. There's my report.
You have to at least reword some.
No. Bear with me, okay? Bear with me. You're going to go look at the Wikipedia entry on this, and then you're going to look at... Well, no. We'll go ahead and say it's the wiki entry of the game itself, just to make this a little bit more in-depth. But the point is, I copy-paste, right? I just get rid of a few things and format it differently. You read the wiki entry, and then based off of that, put it down and write your own report based on the entry you found there, okay?
Okay.
Now, the former is exactly what I was talking about with someone who doesn't add anything to it. Literally all I'm doing is cloning it. All I'm doing is the Christmas Carol cover. I'm not adding anything. I'm not adding my own flavor, my own taste, my own impressions.
Or you're doing it poorly.
Or I'm doing it poorly. My sister, while she is still taking something that exists and putting it out, is at least putting her own spin on it, is at least trying something in order to add her own sense of flavor to it. Now, obviously, this is more gray than I'm making it out to be.
Now, obviously, the best example of this would be to play the game and then go through and write a review based off of your playthrough.
But you get my point, right? There is
Yes.
a difference between doing what is essentially
Copy-paste.
there's a difference between copy-paste and a remix.
Now,
And music
of
is
that
really
example,
prolific of this.
like I said, that one particular storyline that I was just telling you about, and I saw 5 different, however many different versions of it.
17.
No, I think it was 5.
Okay.
The television show and one of the anime, the only difference between the 2 of them was one of them was a television show and one of them was an anime.
So, I could believe that too.
Literally, copy-paste.
Yeah.
There were some minor dialogue changes, but honestly, I'm more inclined to believe that was because of mistranslations from translating the English into Japanese back into English.
Yeah.
Okay, actually it was Korean, but whatever. So that makes me mad. But if you're going to take that story and you're going to decide to twist it,
So that instead of being just a one-up mushroom.
so instead of it just being an ugly girl, it's a girl who was traumatized, and she's only ugly because she's introverted. And you now have changed the story into, you've changed the story from, is Pretty Woman about that too?
I don't remember. It's been too long.
Anyway, there's
And I didn't
some
like that
popular movie in history where they took an ugly person and they made her pretty.
There's
But
a
instead of
10
taking
things I hate about
someone who
you.
is plain and making them attractive, and taking someone who is mentally scarred and introverted and therefore hides from people, and making them appear socially acceptable. Those are two completely different stories. They have the same basic layout. They have the same basic thread. You can tell that they're the same story, but they're different.
Oh, one other thing I want to point out, by the way, and it occurred to me because this is something I do too. When I do a remix or a variance or a composite, which is what I call my 3 types of remixes, they're all basically remixes when you get down to it, I always make it a point of saying this is a remix of this. I never hide that. That's actually really important because usually you can tell if someone is going to, if someone is doing a copy-paste, if they try to not say they're doing that. If they say that this is their original work, it is more likely that they are doing a copy-paste or something along those lines. And this is true in most medias as well.
Yes.
Not just music. Whereas someone who is more open about the fact that, my inspiration or my source of thing, or this is a cover of a remix of blah, is far more likely to be someone who tries to do something with it. And like Sis said at the beginning of this whole discussion, there's nothing new under the sun. There hasn't been for a bagrillion years.
It is literally impossible to write a new story.
And the only reason I bring that up is it irritates me to no end. It's a pet peeve of mine when people say, that's just the same old story. There's nothing new about it. I always want to take that person and say, there is nothing new. There is nothing new, okay? Just live with it. Sorry, moving on. One last question before we cut this off for the evening.
Okay.
If you were given the choice to write a completely individual one-off piece, or given the opportunity to write for an existing setting that you liked, whether, probably a setting
It would
continuity.
depend on the situation and the setting and where the inspiration struck. A classic example of that is the runoff that you and I have been working on for multiple years now of the Warcraft setting.
Mm-hmm.
But likewise, I also rather enjoy writing things that are in and of their own self, hence the Ordanian story.
Okay, I can see that. And then I scratch your tummy. Any closing words, my dear?
There's only one closing thing to do.
What?
The sound.
But I can't do the sound. Only
I
you
have
can
to do the sound, but you have to get to the thing so I can do the sound so you can close it.
Well, I'm ready. Are you ready?
Well, guys, we'll catch you next time on Tea Time with Zam. I hope Tea Time with Xahn and Arch, apparently. And I hope you rather enjoyed this. If you have any ideas of topics you'd like for us to discuss, please feel free to include them here as a comment on here. And we'll be signing off now. Pachoo!